Hello everyone. In our last video, we learned to design a robot and we created design for a robotic crane. In this video, as a part of robotics construction level 2, we are going to construct the crane. The learning objectives from this video are build the crane from our design and understand what is 2 degree of freedom. Step 1 of the design. We wanted two C plates connected together to form the sides of the base. And here you can see we have two C plates connected together here and two more here to form two sides of the base. They are connected with two nut and bolts each. Let's go to the next step. In this step, we are going to connect one rectangular plate to two assemblies of C plates we created in last step. And we are going to do that using two nuts and bolts shown here. We are also going to connect a motor with the motor shaft, and onto the motor shaft we are going to mount a small gear and keep it in place using a shaft lock. We are also going to create a hole to mount a big gear, and that we are going to create using one flat rotator and one bolt. If you see here, this is not exactly to the edge of these slits, it is slightly away from the edge. The exact distance you will understand when you put big gear alongside the small gear here. Let's go to the next step. In this step, we have connected one axle and one big gear. The axle we have inserted through the hole which we created using flat rotator in our earlier step. This axle is locked from below using a shaft lock. This we are going to call as assembly E. In next step, we are going to create a different assembly using square plates joined by two L connectors on each end using two nut bolts each. We are also going to create one square hole using a flat rotator. You see, since we want a square hole, we have attached two nuts and bolts on both the circular holes of the flat rotator. Here the direction is shown as head up and tail down, but I would want you to reverse the direction. Remember, reverse the direction of the bolts. The bolt head should be below and bolt tail should be up. We are also going to create one more hole here using a flat rotator, but this hole is a circular hole we want. Hence we have only connected one nut and bolt. Now this one we are going to use for our big gear which drives the assembly which takes the load up and down. This one we will call as assembly B. Let's go to the next step. Now here we are going to create another assembly that uses one single bar connected to the gear B. We are connecting using two nuts and bolt, but we have two shaft locks which are sandwiched between this big gear and the single bar. They are not visible because they are just below this single bar and above this gear B. If we do not use those shaft locks, when we tighten these nuts and bolts, this single bar bends. We don't want that, and hence we have used two shaft locks below the single bar and just above the big gear. We have also connected one flat rotator at the end of this single bar and created a circular hole. And we took a single bar and attached it to this single bar using 1-inch bolt which is loosely coupled. So this single bar can move freely. We will call this as assembly C. Let's go to the next step. In this step, we are going to take the assembly B and attach one L connector here. And to that L connector, we are going to attach one flat connector. This is going to be attached using one nut and bolt tight. We want it exactly at a right angle and we want it to be very tight. We are also connected one DC motor with the motor shaft, and on top of that we have mounted a small gear and secured it in place using a shaft lock. This we will call assembly D now. Let's go to the next step. In step 7, we are going to mount the assembly C over assembly D. So this is our C assembly, which is the big gear and these two single bars, and we are going to mount it on our assembly D, which we created in our last step, using a small axle and two shaft locks. One shaft lock on this side, one shaft lock on the other side of the axle, so that the axle is secured in place. Ensure that the gears are perfectly meshing. They are not over meshing or they are not away from each other. We'll call this as assembly E. Let's go to the next step. Now in this step, we are going to mount our assembly E, which we created in our last step, over assembly A, which we created in our second step. We are going to connect two spacers on the axle which was there on this big gear. And after those two spacers, we are going to put our assembly B on that and secure it with the shaft lock. Now this completes our robot. What is a 2-degree freedom here? If you see, this mast rotates horizontally while this assembly goes up and down. So we have one rotation here and we have the second rotation. So in the same robot, the robot's one assembly goes up and down here, and the same whole assembly also rotates right left 360 degrees. And that is called a 2-degree freedom. What did we learn from this video? We have built a crane from the design which we created in our last video. And we have understood what is 2-degree of freedom. We will come back with another video with another design. Till then, bye bye.